President Obama has made it clear that the United States welcomes the rise of a peaceful, prosperous, and stable China, one that plays a responsible role in Asia and the world, and supports rules and norms on economic and security issues. The President has been clear, as have I, that we are committed to avoiding the trap of strategic rivalry and intend on forging a relationship in which we can broaden our cooperation on common interests and constructively manage our differences and disagreements.
Here's a question for you. A child might ask it. Can you avoid a, quote, strategic rivalry with a foreign dictatorship if they want to have that rivalry with you? Can closing your eyes and wishing really hard turn China into an ally? The other day, a Chinese fighter jet conducted a dangerous intercept of a U.S. surveillance aircraft off the Chinese coast, coming within 30 feet of literally crashing into it. China's denied the accusations, calling the flight a routine identification check. I guess you get to say things like that if you own more than $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bills. Journalist and author Gordon Chang joins me in studio to talk about what a real China strategy might look like. Mr. Chang, it's great to have you in-house. We spoke to you the other day from New York. And of course, your book is right on point, The Coming Collapse of China by Random House. Tell me what your thoughts are on this latest almost contact between two planes high in the sky. I mean, very dangerous. That's, I don't know if I would call that a juvenile act, but that's a provocative act. I don't think that was an individual pilot making that decision. That was surely an order from someone, go and get in their face.
Well, clearly, China has been engaged in dangerous flying for more than a decade. And just this year, there's been incidents in March, April, and May, and now this one. Yeah. And you know, U.S. officials, as reported in the Wall Street Journal on Sunday, said, oh, this was a rogue pilot, and they didn't believe that it was...
I don't believe that. I don't believe that.
China's military is very tightly controlled by its flag officers. Not only do you have chain of command control, but you also have political control because you have political officers in each unit. Right. So clearly, this was a decision from the top, not only the top of the People's Liberation Army, but probably from the top of the political system itself.
Now, what would be the purpose of it? Just waving a warning stick at the Americans not to get too close? Because let's just put a map up on the screen here. There are Chinese adventures going on all around, I guess what China would like to call Greater China, whether it's the Senkaku Islands off Japan, or that oil rig near Vietnam, or the border area with India. China is sort of flexing its muzzle. So I don't want to use the word Lebensraum, but China does want room, economic room, demographic room. What's this about?
Well, China wants to control its periphery, and it wants to grab territory and seas from its neighbors. So from India in the south to South Korea in the north, China wants to be bigger. And the United States has always defended freedom of navigation for more than 2 centuries. If we've had a consistent foreign policy, it has been the right to go on the seas and in the skies. And China doesn't want that because it believes that the South China Sea is an internal Chinese lake.
Now, Taiwan has always been a very loyal ally of the United States. It's very Americanized. I don't detect, I've been there, I didn't detect the same sort of anti-American culture that you find in some parts of Korea, for example, even in some parts of Japan. But is America showing the kind of loyalty and dependability for Japan, Taiwan, and other allies as it has historically? Or are we doing a bit of a Ukraine thing where we're saying, well, we did promise you to defend you? I'm thinking of the Budapest Memorandum in 1994 where America promised to back up Ukraine. Is America being perceived as wobbly in Taiwan, Korea, Japan, India, Vietnam, or is America still strong there?
Well, throughout the region, there are concerns about American leadership, and they were really illustrated in the Syria debacle, because in Syria, the president said, I want to use force, but I got to go to Congress. Well, people in Japan and South Korea, which have mutual defense treaties with the U.S., they then started to ask, does President Obama need to go to Congress if China attacks us?
Yeah.
And so clearly we unnerved the region with those actions. And since then, the Obama administration's been doing its best, but maybe not enough, to tell the region that the United States is there. Obviously, China doesn't believe it because we've just had this incident on August 19th where they interfered and intercepted our Navy P-8 reconnaissance plane. So Beijing clearly doesn't get the message.
Now, I know that the U.S. Pacific Fleet used to be a very high priority. I think under the Reagan years, the 600-ship Navy was the goal. But in recent years, the Obama administration has cut back various arms of the armed forces, including the Navy. Can you speak to the kind of assets that the U.S. has and the upcoming People's Liberation Army Navy, including their new aircraft carrier?
Yeah, China is building its Navy because it wants to dominate its surrounding seas, also wants to secure lines of communication, its oil from the Middle East and elsewhere. The Navy right now, our Navy, is under 300 ships. It's going to be cut back to levels not seen since World War I. The United States has said it's going to put 60% of its ships into the Pacific. And if that is indeed the case, and if we can do that between now and 2020, that would be a good thing. But people in the region are very concerned that we won't do it because of the cutbacks of the defense budget.
How technically proficient is the Chinese Navy? I mean, until about 15 years ago, all of their equipment was a generation or two behind. Have they caught up militarily? This new aircraft carrier that it's not deployed yet, but they're testing it, they own it. No. Would you say that they're on par with, let's say, a Japan or a Korea? They're obviously not at American levels, but how dangerous is the PLA Navy? Well,
they're on a par with Japan. Japan has a very capable naval self-defense force. The thing about what's happening with China, as it builds up its Navy, and it's doing it very fast as well, the countries in the region are doing the same thing because China is threatening them. China's threatened Japan, it threatens Vietnam, and it threatens India. So you have these countries building up their naval forces. And then in conjunction with ours, because we are starting to see a coalition of like-minded countries. You know, we are much stronger than the Chinese, but it's very dangerous because the Chinese believe that they can, it's not a question of military assets, it's a question of political will, and they believe that they've got more political will than we do or anybody else.
Well, listen, if Bashar Assad can stare down Barack Obama, surely China can, and the fact that it owns $1 trillion worth of treasury bills, that's just another stick. Great to have you here in studio, Mr. Cheng. It's a pleasure to meet you in person.